You're listening to the Sokan Community Podcast. Your favorite source for gaming, film, and internet debate starts now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sokan Podcast. I'm your host, T, and with me, as always, are Jace and Leo.
That's Jace Drayson!
And hello, I'm
Leo, you
Leo.
didn't even try. Match my
Look,
energy.
I can't hit those notes, man. Someone kick me in the junk. Maybe I'll hit them.
Sorry, it's another week of quarantine and another week of respecting the internet as a common utility and a necessity. How you guys holding up?
You know, the longer you quarantine, the more you get used to it, I've decided. And while things are still flaring up and things are really no better, and in some places getting worse, it's like humans are adaptable, man, and we just press on and do what you have to do. So I'm pressing on and doing what I have to do. Actually, me and Leo have been playing a little bit of Star Trek Bridge Crew. That's been really fun.
It's so fun. It's like it's super nerd fun too, because it's not like an action game. You're like just looking at a console and pushing buttons. And it's so fun. Okay, so
5 more seconds. I'm energizing.
I want to play it right now, actually. Yeah, you adapt. I mean, that really is the reality of people as a whole. It's just the new normal right now. I've found, I'm working from home. I'm sitting inside of my living room. I'm living my best life, actually, as an antisocial introvert. So I'm having a great time. The challenges, of course, are, you're worried. I read some stuff online that worried me a little more, and we're trying to get, my daughters to finish schoolwork, and my wife is working from home, and we're trying to make that reality work. But it's not that bad. We're still comfortable. We still have an air-conditioned house. We're sleeping in beds and full bellies. I mean, there's not much to really complain about right now.
How about you, T?
Well, besides the fact that I almost lost power for a second time since the quarantine started yesterday, thank you, severe weather. I have a box of croissants, and therefore I am fine.
There you go.
Dude, we had a tornado roll through here Saturday night, early Sunday morning. That was crazy.
All right, well, this week we're going to talk about Marvel's Phase 4 timeline shift due to the movie delays, and then we're going to try and talk about some stuff that's less depressing. So, things like Borderlands 3's newest downloadable content, love, guns, and tentacles, and its inclusion of LGBTQ plus themes, as well as the resurgence of the wildly popular tabletop game Dungeons and Dragons. Let's roll. Ever since the announcement of Marvel's Black Widow being delayed beyond its speculated May release, the entirety of the Phase 4 release schedule has been shifted and moved around, with some movies and Disney Plus shows being moved to entirely new segments of the timeline, and others being delayed significantly into next year or beyond. Fans are left to wonder when we'll get to see most of these movies, and whether the timeline of their releases points to signs of what may happen between them. So a lot of Marvel's movies they're significantly released into this, where individual tracks will happen and can be enjoyed separately, and then they have one big get together in like an Avengers showdown. So a lot of these movies then need to be released in a certain order for the sake of continuity. How do you guys feel about some of these titles pushed so far back just so that they can come out a little bit after another title?
I mean, I'm for it. I want the movies to. I'm trying to look on the bright side of this. Huge MCU fanboy, ginormous, like the biggest. I watch all of the movies through in succession relatively regularly. Like I'm always somewhere in the MCU. So I'm trying to look on the bright side of life. While very disappointed in the huge gap, I also would prefer that they keep my continuity intact. I don't want to wreck it, and I don't want to see something out of order in terms of creation order. I'm okay with it. I'm okay with the gap. Let's just leave it at. I'm not ecstatic. I'm not pissed. I'm okay.
I think there really are so many factors to consider. It's hard to know how to feel If I think about it rationally, part of me is, frankly, I'm kind of tired of superhero movies. There have been so many in such quick succession over so many years. I'm a little burnt out. That said, I've enjoyed most of them. So, enjoying them, enjoying new ones would be cool. There are some other services that have been shooting them out, to folks at home, and I respect that effort, to at least afford folks some modicum of, fresh entertainment. They're enjoying quarantine, but there's another part of me that appreciates the fact that companies got to make money, and the MCU is as good as it is because it has made consistent returns, and this is probably the way they feel they're going to get the most. So I don't hate them for it either. I also don't love it. I'm so ambivalent.
I'm not ambivalent because that implies a not care, and I'm super passionate about this. If I could devote my life to it in some way, I would. But I'm not at all burnt out on superhero movies, by the way. I know Leah said that. I disagree. I think that as long as it's a good story, give me as much superhero. And the reason I say that is because each MCU film kind of has its own genre of life, right? There's not just this one flavor of superhero movie. There's like the spy thriller, usually in the Captain America. There's like the high adventure with Iron Man. There's like a little bit of fantasy with Thor. There's sci-fi with the Guardians. So there's a really wide swath of genres that are covered, even though it's still a superhero movie. These beings are superheroes, right? So I don't feel at all tired of it. I'm always craving more. But there is also a part of me that feels like Endgame was huge, maybe the biggest cinematic thing that has ever happened ever, certainly in terms of ticket sales, but also in terms of zeitgeist, social thought. It was a huge thing. And then Spider-Man Far From Home was just kind of the epilogue after that, right? I'm okay with giving us a breather right now at this point in the MCU history. It kind of makes sense. It's okay to let everybody just digest the hugeness that was Endgame, enjoy the epilogue a little bit that kind of had a great heart to it, and let us breathe. I think that when they come back, we'll be all the more happy to receive them.
Yeah, I don't share quite the same level of enthusiasm. I enjoyed the movies as movies, but I think there's potential that I represent more, I don't know, of the average everyday moviegoer, and so I think, while I can appreciate how big Endgame was, there were similar movies or similar releases that I think had similar reaches, like Lord of the Rings. To me, that I think was maybe my Endgame, at least for how Jace perceived Endgame. But there are tons of perspectives and tons of sensibilities about who's tired or what's going to be better at the box office. The truth is, nobody's at the box office right now, so their reality was delay or, I guess, suffer less return, and they decided this was in their best fiscal interest, and I can't disagree with them.
Yep. In the same vein, some theaters and production companies have been releasing films online through streaming platforms like Disney Plus, Amazon, and Hulu. We mentioned in a previous episode, and it seems backed up now, that Black Widow will not be one of the films seen online. Screening. Do you guys think that that's the right call?
Or screaming, whatever. I recently watched Trolls 2 on demand at home with my girls. We paid a premium for it, because it's one of those movies that was supposed to come out in theaters but obviously didn't, and I was grateful that it came out in a place where my girls and wife and I could get a little bit of reprieve from the reality of quarantine. So I rather appreciate those companies that have decided to offer streaming services, and I'm willing. I'm also fortunate enough to be in a position where I can pay a little bit more to enjoy them. It's certainly not a movie theater ticket price. It's not a movie theater experience, but it sufficed. As far as why Disney has decided not to release these, I have to assume there were some calculations that went on where they realized their bottom line would be better waiting. So be it.
Yeah, I'm sure that there's all kind of calculus that goes on to decide whether it's a better idea to push it out now to get it rolling or to hold off. Ultimately, I'm glad that they're not releasing Black Widow, but I'm also glad that several other movies are coming out for streaming early because it gives us something to do. I prefer my MCU on the big screen. I prefer to have popcorn in hand and a big old large giant Coke. That experience for me is the MCU experience. I've pretty much been to opening weekend of every MCU film ever released, and I want to do it with Black Widow too, a lot because I love her. But these streaming movies, I'm actually pretty excited about some of the Disney stuff that's coming out early, and I think it's a really cool thing that even though it's probably better for them financially in some way, it's still a cool thing that the whole culture is kind of shifting and adjusting and adapting to this new reality we live in.
Some of the major plots speculated in this phase of the MCU revolve around the multiverse, which we've heard rumors will be mostly explored through the Doctor Strange sequel, Multiverse of Madness, and through the Disney Plus series WandaVision. Do you guys think that these shows and the major plots that weave between them and the films are going to suffer because of the new schedule?
Nah, I think they'll be better. Anything that has more development time is just going to get better, if you ask me. I'm not concerned at all about the plots. Kevin Feige's a genius anyway. He had it well in hand on a quick pace. They really haven't rushed these films out before, so just giving them time to percolate is only going to make them better films, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know. Frankly, I'm not a huge fan of just TV shows in general. If I'm going to watch something that I want to be entertained by, I'd much prefer it come in a 90-minute to 2-hour snippet of a wholly wrapped up story. The idea of television series, they bore me, and I find myself growing disenchanted with them pretty quick. WandaVision looks really interesting. It looks like it's a cool story, and honestly, of any element of the MCU that would capture my interest, it's the magic in MCU. Doctor Strange is one of my favorites, and the Scarlet Witch is one of my favorites because there's I think because there's so much crossover with just a fantasy genre that tends to be my go-to and my favorite, and WandaVision is in line with that. We'll see, how it holds up. I don't know. The cynical side of me is already not going to watch it, so we'll see.
You're not going to watch WandaVision or Multiverse of Madness?
Well, if Multiverse of Madness is a movie, looks like it,
yes,
is it a movie?
Yes, that's the movie, and Scarlet Witch is in Multiverse of Madness.
Yeah, I'll probably watch that because it's a movie. I probably won't watch WandaVision. It looks fascinating, but it's so poorly named. I'm just off the cuff uninterested in it.
I'm super excited for WandaVision. I think largely because I feel like it is going to be an exploration of the multiverse. I don't know that, but the trailer lends you to believe it. Also a huge fan of Vision, and he left us too soon in Infinity War. Miss him, so I'm excited to see him come back.
Yeah.
And two, one thing that's different with these Disney Plus films is that they are going to directly into the MCU. Theoretically, before they said that was going to happen with like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Defenders and Daredevil, that was, oh yeah, they're in the same universe. But since development, release, cancellation, they now say no, they really weren't part of the MCU. These are actually going to be developed and creatively put together within the context of the larger MCU storyline. So I think you might miss out on parts of the overall narrative and tale if you don't watch the Disney Plus pieces.
Sure. I mean, that's I think that's been used to great effect, like Captain Marvel being shoehorned in. So everybody felt they had to watch it so that they could, keep up to speed, even though she was,
Fantastic.
sure, we have our opinions. um, but I don't know. I also think there's something that changes. The MCU is fantastic when it comes to movies. They really haven't been so good when it comes to TV shows. You have, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s been criticized. Agent Carter, Inhumans, like some of those shows just really haven't made the same mark that the movies have. I do like the characters of Vision and Scarlet Witch, and I love the actors. I think if anybody can pull it off, it's probably them. But I just don't have high hopes. Plus, honestly, like I've said, I'm just not a huge not sitcom, but just TV show watcher. I get bored. They tend to draw stories out to the point where they're not fun anymore.
I tend to like them if they're streamable. Bingeable. I have a hard time with a week between a show. That gives me a little bit of angst, and I don't say get bored, but it is harder to keep interest when there's a span between a chapter.
I definitely had to binge all the shows that we've wanted to talk about here on the podcast. I've had to binge them because I just couldn't keep up with them week to week.
Would you say then the WandaVision is the movie or show that you're most excited for Phase 4? Or is that the one that has your heart?
Did you say has me hard?
Has your heart.
Your heart.
Apologies.
Family-friendly podcast.
Didn't mean to risk our PG rating there. That's a hard question, actually. I am probably the most excited for Multiverse of Madness right now, just because I too love Doctor Strange, and I'm very excited to see what they're going to do with. I think the pairing of Scarlet Witch and Doctor Strange is genius, and I love the multiverse. The multiverse has been teased in MCU, but it hasn't been fully explored, right? Like it's been alluded to by the Ancient One in Doctor Strange. Mysterio pretended like he was from another parallel universe, but he really wasn't. That was all kind of a shisty thing. But it's the groundwork is there. I'm actually pretty stoked to see what they're gonna do with a multiverse.
Yeah, I mean, Doctor Strange is one of my favorite characters in the MCU. His movie, the first movie was, it was kind of, I think, received more neutrally than some of the other ones. It wasn't great, but it also wasn't lambasted. But it for me, I do think it's because of that fantasy element, because it's magic, because it's. I also just like Doctor Strange as a character. I do frankly see a lot of me in him. He's this embittered cynic. I also consider myself a wizard, though. No, I don't know. I really like the character and the concept. So I think I'm probably most excited about that too. Honestly, any of the TV shows, frankly, it's just because they're TV shows. I'm not interested in them. It's not that I don't think the stories would be interesting. It's just because they're TV shows.
That's so narrow-minded, dude. Like Loki is one of the best characters in the MCU. He's going to be on a TV show, and you don't watch it. I disagree
with that.
I love Loki. Hawkeye's going to have a show.
Yeah.
Falcon and Winter Soldier. We've got to know if Falcon's really going to be Cap, the new Cap.
Yeah, I mean, those are interesting things to read in a wiki page. Like, they're not going to be interesting for me to watch week after week after week as they stretch out nonsensical plot points over the course of months just for me to know, hey, is this going to happen or is that going to happen? And I honestly wasn't a huge fan of Loki. I thought he was interesting. I thought he was witty, but I didn't fangirl over him.
Fake news.
As someone who experienced Tumblr when it was obsessed with him, I'm a little worried. A little worried about what the future holds.
Yeah, it's bad. Loki love is bad.
Yeah, well, he's Presh, number one, but he's also a super fun character.
But he's a super fun character that will throw you over a cliff at the first opportunity. I don't get how people really dig these characters.
This character we don't know exactly who the character is going to be in the show because Loki is dead. I'm assuming this Loki is the Loki that is displaced from time by the Tesseract based on the time screw up. So this is still big bad Loki. So it's going to be pretty interesting to me.
There's only so many stories that can be told that are interesting with, hey, Loki seems like he's coming around. Oh no, he tried to kill everyone again. Loki.
That's the lore. That's
like,
not even just the lore. That's the mythology of the god. He's the
but how
trickster
fun
god.
is that over and over and over? Like,
for me,
I get
super.
it. I enjoyed it the first time, maybe the second time, but come on, you're 15 iterations in.
He had a nice arc in the Young Avengers, which I unfortunately don't have time to expand on because we're at the end of the segment, but...
I do like Young Avengers. I will just tag that in as well.
Well, the MCU plans to kick back into action in the box office with a November 6th release date for Black Widow. It's going to be a little while longer before we get to see Scarlett Johansson kick butt with her comrades, but hopefully that won't end up being delayed any further. Fingers crossed. Borderlands 3, the most recent of the shoot and loot series, took a long time to get into the limelight, and once it was released, people kind of stopped talking about it, which was a little weird. It has a 9 out of 10 on IGN, but you're more likely to find people talking about Animal Crossing or the new Doom. Granted, the world does have other problems at the moment, but regardless, a new DLC is coming out soon called Love, Guns, and Tentacles. Not only does it include Aaron Hansen and its voice cast, popular for his series Game Grumps on YouTube, it also highlights a gay relationship between two primary characters from the game. Although the LGBTQ world has been made widely more mainstream in the last few years, there's still a severe lack of representation in a lot of the gaming industry. How do you guys feel about Hammerlock, a character we've had in Borderlands for quite some time, opening up as a gay character?
I don't know. I feel the same way as if he opened up as a straight character.
Leo, you don't have to open up as straight. That's a natural thing that people just assume you are. I mean,
sure.
Having said that, I'm nonplussed myself. I mean, I don't really care a whole lot about it. Hammerlock. I guess I'll send him his membership card.
I was going to say, you guys are the same team now.
I mean, I didn't vote him in. I didn't get a vote on that one. I'm glad in the sense that, okay, yeah, representation is awesome. But I'm just so not into Borderlands as a franchise that I can't even muster a fabulous.
I bet you could if you tried. Come on, Jace. Give us a fabulous.
Fabulous! I couldn't do it.
Hold on. Let me see if I can. Fabulous!
I don't know. I mean, I'm glad it's happened, but, you know, I'd prefer it in other places. And it's mostly this is just a personal thing. I'm not into the series. I'm not into Borderlands. I don't want to overstate it, but just looking at it makes me want to vomit. So I want to be excited because yay, we've made it, baby, or whatever the saying is. We've come a long way, baby.
That's it.
But
we've come a long way.
I don't care. Good, Hammerlock. I hope you get yourself a one true love for life.
I mean, I do too. I hope he's happy. But yeah, I don't care. Whatever. I do think it is actually okay. Let me say this. I do think it is it's a fantastic testament to how far our culture has come, where we can be nonplussed about this, where we can be ambivalent about it, and I think mainstream, quote unquote, culture at large is also the same way, and that actually is a really powerful step. I'd heard actually just earlier today that our culture has really come so far that even, well, how was it phrased? That even like conservative viewpoints of today are more liberal than the liberal viewpoints of like the 1950s of Western culture. And that to me is fantastic. That really is an awesome testament to just how far we have come. So, you know, as far as that goes, awesome. As far as Borderlands, you know, whatever.
World of Warcraft recently forced a guild to change its name after trolls mass reported it, specifically because it was an LGBTQ guild called the Gay Boys. The attacks were coordinated, particularly with texts that said things we won't repeat on this show, and although Blizzard then reinstated the guild, we can't help but wonder if this kind of negativity is inherent on the internet or tied to the gaming industry. Thoughts?
Yeah, I read this one and I was a little bit torn because in a lot of ways, honestly, I think our guild, the Divine Conclave, could probably be called the Gay Boys and still function similarly.
What? Why are you looking at me?
No, but seriously. Honestly, I do think it really is just the fact that the internet tends to bring out the worst in people. And I think those who want to troll, those who want to be despicable, they find whatever they can. They find whatever is a soft spot and they push it and poke at it and, make fun of, whatever they think is going to bring the greatest rise out of people, be it racial, be it sexual orientation, be it somebody's gender identity, whatever it is. I don't know. I don't see this as, oddly enough, I don't see this as egregious in the larger sphere of just awful internet people.
There are awful internet people. Haters are going to hate. Trolls are going to troll. Deplorables are going to deplore. And that is the simple fact of the matter. The unfortunate thing about the internet, it is kind of the mirror of its greatest power, is that it congregates people who have deplorable views of the world. And so there is like this mass mob mentality of hatred that can happen when it is allowed to run rampant. The flip side of that is the internet also allows people to find their community, and no matter how niche you may feel that you are, there are millions of other people that you can connect with on the internet to find strength and support. I will say the internet has changed and is changing. There was not it wasn't too terribly long ago when I had to story time with Jace. I had to, if I was going to join a guild or a community, I would often do this. I would let people know ahead of time, hey, I'm a gay person. Is this going to be a problem? And sometimes it was. That's something we just don't want to deal with. If you're going to put it out there so much, we don't want to know. Blah blah blah. When Leo and I first met, he had started a guild in Elder Scrolls. This was way pre Sokan, and it was called Relics, fun guild. And I messaged him and asked him the same thing. I told him the same thing. I'm a gay person. I'm going to have gay themes to what I do. It's what I do. And Leo's response was kind of like, I feel terrible that you have to even ask me that. Of course, that's fine. No problem. Whatever. But having lived on the internet for a long time and been gay for a long time, sometimes the internet's a hateful place to be. Sokan is not that way.
How long have you been gay, Jace?
Let's see. Just about 15 years. Most of the first part was like gay. Anyway, but no, the internet is different now, and I feel like, especially like in our community, it's not even like an issue at all. We don't even. It's like nobody cares what anybody else is. Everybody's welcome. Come on in, doors flung wide open. As long as you want to RP, as long as you want to have fun playing games and not be a jerk, come play.
I do remember that conversation, and it's one that, in fact, still kind of baffles me. Here we were, a couple of nerds on the internet, role playing as fantasy people in a fantasy world, and we're still dealing with among a bunch of, for lack of a better term, kind of social outcasts, social rejects, and we're still dealing with some of that nonsense. To me, it baffled me that would even be a reality, and I did genuinely feel really bad that was a thing, and it kind of brought home too, just how people's experiences are different. Everybody experiences their own unique challenges and their own unique things. As a result of that, I do think it's critical that we all try and remain open to what those challenges might be. In fact, the administration of our current guild, it's actually Jace who usually reminds me, we don't know what this person's going through. We don't know, what it is that is their challenge. Let's not write it off immediately. And I do think potentially having faced adversity for so long has heightened your own senses to that, Jace.
Yeah, probably so.
Everything happens for a reason. May not feel like a good reason, but there's a reason. Now, we can't talk about Borderlands without briefly talking about video game violence. Alongside recent releases like Doom, Borderlands is commonly recalled as peak violence in gaming. However, it's also a stylistically cartoony and very silly series. Do you guys think that the series gets away with its violence, and should it?
So I'm strictly in the camp of video games don't cause violence. I do think that any serious study into the subject has rather thoroughly debunked that perspective. I do think the only holdouts are, I don't know, boomers. No, that's not fair. I think the only holdouts really are people who they have another agenda. They have a different focus as opposed to scientific truth. But the idea that Borderlands could cause violence or that it's inherently extra violent, I mean, it's violent, sure, but I mean, hundreds of games are, quote, violent. And how do you even define violence? Are vehicles exploding violent? Are games where you fist fight, are those as violent? Like, no, there's way too many different nuances and categories to label anything extra violent. The idea that they would cause it's ridiculous. So the fact that it's cartoony, yes, probably gives it a little bit more of a pass, but frankly, I don't think it was in that category to begin with.
Sometimes, though, and I agree with the sentiment of what you're saying, but sometimes there is a taste level that, I do find some things kind of tacky, and I don't really want to see it. And possibly that's me more than a judgment call for everybody on the planet, but I don't like the art direction of Borderlands. First of all, I don't like cell shading on a video game. I don't like the silliness of the way it looks. But when you take those really lighthearted, almost whimsical pieces of art and then put blood splatter in it, it kind of just, I don't know, I feel like it's tacky. But I'm also the same guy, like in Dragon Age, I turn off blood splatter because I don't want to see it. It's not something that really delights me. Some people like to play violent video games, and I think that's fine, and I don't judge it in terms of, what kind of a person that makes you, but there is kind of I do make a stink face a little bit at that kind of nasty.
I'm not surprised. I don't know. I'm just not surprised.
I don't like gore. I don't watch gory movies either. It queases me up.
That's the sound I imagine you making. Ew.
Ew.
I do tend to like violent games. I mean, we played Vermintide together, like an incredibly violent game. And it took one playthrough for Jace to be like, oh, no, absolutely, this is
not my thing. I don't like the sound of bones crunching. I don't like meaty gut sounds. I just don't. In all of Game of Thrones, like there are 8 seasons of Game of Thrones, really great show up until the end. The thing that just I can't barely think of the show without thinking of it and getting completely icked is whenever Oberon, is that his name, Martell, got his head squashed by the mountain. God, yeah. That's horrible. I don't like that kind of stuff.
I mean, I agree with you. They're gross, and for sure, there's I don't know. So a game like Vermintide, to me, there is a kind of a strange as a saying. There's a kind of a zen to it, to the repetitive, like, wading through hordes of enemies. Like, there is something fun and entertaining about that. I don't mind the gore. I do think there's a touch of desensitization, but the truth is it's graphic or graphical desensitization. We talked a little bit before about how I don't think that really carries over into real life, and I still don't. But when you see depictions of gore, there certainly is a certain level of like tolerance that can be built up, and those games can actually be kind of entertaining. I don't know. I don't begrudge a game for that, not at all.
I don't know. I'm okay with violence as long as I'm on the bridge of a starship and I can blow up 400 souls 248 meters off the port bow.
Well, yeah, that's my point. Like in Star Trek, how many like virtual souls have we killed blowing
know,
up
I'm telling you.
starships? Like that's incredibly violent.
But we didn't
It's
have to hear it.
Yeah, it is a different experience, totally.
Borderlands 3 Love, Guns, and Tentacles is slated to release on March 26th, pending any potential delays, and our producer Sil certainly can't wait for an excuse to actually finish the series. Catch up, dude. In the last few years, Dungeons & Dragons, as well as other tabletop roleplay games, have been making a huge comeback in mainstream media. We discussed last week how the term mainstream in gaming and nerd culture world has been less and less necessary, and for a game that used to be associated with the pinnacle of basement-dwelling geeks and nerds, it's pretty amazing to see it brought out into the limelight. To talk us through the world of D&D, we have a special guest and leader of Sokan gaming community's own venture into tabletop games, Sully.
Hello.
Welcome, Sully.
Yeah.
Yay! Alright, we're gonna go ahead and jump on in. What do you guys think has brought games like D&D so much popularity recently? Do you think it's an effect of shows like Critical Role that make people want to play it? Or are these shows more of an after effect to the fact that people already want to?
I think it's probably a mix of both. Well, not the shows making the games more popular. I think it's a cross effect of the fact that games like D&D are more widely accepted, and there are better venues with which to reach out to people. You don't have to have a syndicated show on a network in order to get out. You can record something and put it up on YouTube, and you can create something really popular. I think that's been the success of Critical Role and others like it.
Two, and I don't think this should be discounted very much, but Stranger Things put a big shining spotlight on D&D and tabletop gaming in a way that I don't think could be understated. Stranger Things was a phenomenon when it released. Everybody on Netflix saw it. If you weren't familiar with D&D, you got familiar because the nature of season 1 kind of built off of that framework of an adventure of a party, and everybody had their role, and it pushed it into the forefront of just kind of mainstream thought, I think, because that Netflix series was everywhere, all over the place, and wildly popular. And I'm not necessarily saying that D&D wasn't pre that. That's not my point. But I do think when you have a piece of culture that shines a spotlight on something that maybe is niche for nerds like us, geeks like us, then it generates an interest, and people want to know what that is, and they might do a little Googling or a little wikiing and see, what's that all about.
I know for me, it's not necessarily that it's new. It's more people finally have more ways to find groups is the bigger thing. Because I know my biggest one growing up was I didn't have anybody to play with. Not necessarily that I couldn't play. It just, if you don't have a group, you don't have a way to get a hold of people, it doesn't work as well.
God, I relate to that on a spiritual level. No one in my family would be a D&D player, and I so wanted people to play with, but I couldn't. I was a kid in the 80s and the early 90s, and I didn't know anybody who would play.
That's part of the reason I started Yasta, was I wanted to play again, and I had no way of doing it in person anymore.
Built-in friends. That's what we're talking about here at Sokan, y'all.
So we talked a little bit earlier about violence in video games and how, there's always the general argument that they rot our brains, etc. That's a well-known one. D&D, on the flip side, when it's not being accused of being a form of Satan worship, is actually pretty highly praised because it's one of the best methods of learning not only critical thinking, but creative reasoning and math, as well as collaborative teamwork. Do you guys think games like this are actually beneficial for people to play?
I know I helped teach my friend math with it by showing her how to make a character sheet because she was struggling with basic math.
I mean, I think I'm in the camp that is a little bit biased because I'm a huge fan of tabletop and D&D, and I've defended, various criticisms of video games for much the same reason. But I do think they're beneficial. They help instill so many important lessons to the folks who are interested in playing them. From all those things mentioned to just simply, I'll be a little bit stereotypical here, but I think a lot of the times folks are attracted to things like Dungeons and Dragons because they might lack some social skills, they might lack some social awareness. They do tend to be, forgive me for saying, but a little on the nerdy side, speaking for myself at least. And the truth is, they also inspire folks to delve into social networks and being a sociable person on a level they might not otherwise ever aspire to be or ever even be kind of forced to. So they're really important lessons for folks on a bunch of different levels, I think.
It also lets you experiment a lot with how to communicate with people. I know I have an autistic brother, and it helps him a lot in those regards, allowing him to experiment on those different social things without making anybody too angry.
Right, and that's a great point, because it does allow people who may not have a whole lot of social grace have a role to play, to have guardrails on a social experience, and to, like you said, experiment with different ways of being and not have the pressure of having to be 100% yourself, because a lot of that insecurity comes with not being secure in who you are or how to get of your skin. Being able to express through a medium is powerful. And one of the things that I often hope my staff in the real world is that creativity, it really is what it means to be human being. It's one of the very few things on the planet that no other creature does is create things. So whether we're talking about music or sculpting or some other form of art or expression, which I do believe that this kind of tabletop gaming, it allows you to build and create and to expand upon a world. It really does tap into what it means to be a person. What it means to there's nothing I like better than creating. There's nothing that fills me with more happiness than world building or coming up with systems or finding ways to express myself in, whether it's singing or whether it's writing or through guild management. A lot of creative work goes in there, and I think D&D is kind of a really crystallized, boiled down version of just creating something cool around narrative.
With that in mind, you all have kids. Do you have plans to introduce them to Dungeons and Dragons as this form of self-expression, or have you already?
No, I really don't want my daughter to be a Satanist, so I've steered her away.
Same.
I myself have my son already has his own 2 sets of dice, and he helps me with the maps and stuff for Yasta all the time, and even sometimes tries to help me pick out things to put against them. So very much introducing him it slowly in a constructive way, hopefully.
That's awesome. And in fact, the first experience I really had with Dungeons and Dragons, like actually playing it, was through my wife. We dated in high school, and it was the first time like her family played together. And what they shared with me is her parents had actually like really simplified a lot of rules so that she and her brother could play when they were just kids. They really got interested in it, through the very simplified rules. We haven't really set anything like that up for our girls. Neither of us, I think, are we haven't really put forth that kind of effort to do it. Neither of my girls have really expressed the kind of interest, but if they did, man, I think we would. But the whole idea of, there are so many other venues of fantasy video games and, other stuff that they have access to that we just didn't as kids. But if they did, man, that would be really cool. That'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, my daughter was never really interested in that sort of stuff. We did different forms of creative expression. We made videos and stories on tape and sang songs and did shows for as long as I can remember. When I was a kid, I didn't play D&D, but I did play Star Trek tabletop with the neighborhood kids, and that was always just rad fun for me.
Well, hey, maybe that thing to do in quarantine.
No doubt. We played so many board games, especially my wife and daughters. Yeah, this is the time to do it. There ever was
We've actually talked about amongst our officers to do maybe a campaign, a D&D campaign. We've kind of flirted with it. We haven't put anything in stone, but I'm very interested in it. I think it'd be fun to do while we're locked down.
For sure.
And while there's free resources that you can claim on the various websites,
Hello.
depending on producers. Just one of the biggest negative stigmas still associated with D&D is that roleplay is inherently a nerdy thing to do, especially in a fantasy setting. Or all of us are familiar with the various scales of, oh wow, that's acceptable nerdiness and that's just far, depending on where people draw the line. Comparisons between people who play D&D like on Critical Role and comparisons to people who, I think LARPers probably get the worst end of the stick. How do you guys feel those that would consider roleplay a negative games?
We run into them all the time. I mean, as our peers in open world MMOs, we find those people, or they find us on the reg. And there's the old saying, ignore the troll. We don't feed the trolls, and they go about what they want to do. Sometimes they make me laugh. But one of the coolest things that I've experienced in role playing online is that you run into people who perhaps start out trolly, or perhaps start out just with a misconception about what roleplay is, and then get into it, and then find themselves deeply immersed in role-playing. One of our officers had never role-played before she found our guild, saw an ad and thought, why not? Let's see what this is all about. And now she's, running a role-play guild. It's we can label something as nerdy, and that is the perception. There's no way outside of that box. It just is perceived that way. But nerd stuff usually ends up being cool in the end. If you think about it, the nerds are the guys that came up with the internet. The nerds are the guys that came up with Microsoft and the computer codes that give us a lot of fun. They make bank. I wouldn't discount the nerdy endeavors.
Maybe it's just me, but I never thought of it as an insult to be called a nerd or a dork or anything. I know, like, in high school and stuff, it probably was when it was said to me most of the time, but I didn't really think of it that way because I grew up on video games and D&D and playing with my parents and such, so it wasn't as bad to me. Oh.
Yeah, I don't know. I got beat up being a nerd. It was never good for me. But at the same time, like, the things that made me a nerd, it was simply because it was the things that I enjoyed. And the truth is, I do think for all the similarities that we have with gamers as a whole, there certainly are varying grades between gamers, at least in terms of who's considered the cool kids and who are not. That's not new to me. I don't think it's new to any of us. But you have your PvPers that are typically the cool kids, and then you have your PvEers, which are they're more of your midliners, and then you have your role players, and we are the nerds of the gaming community, and that's fine. I'm not unaccustomed to being a nerd. I've in fact adopted it as part of my identity, and that's fine. I've learned that what I find to be entertaining is the more creative stuff, the geekier stuff, and it's helped me make peace with it, because those tend to be the folks that become your Bill Gates. And yeah, I'm okay with that too.
All right. Now we're going to shift gears here, and we're going to talk a little more specific about Sokan's own D&D group, Yasta.
Yasta. First of all, I like the name Yasta. Did you come up with that?
No, Sil came up that.
It's a cool word.
I suck at naming anything. He names everything for me.
It's a good name. Let's give Sil 2 enthusiastic thumbs up. Wink, wink. Yasta D&D plays entirely online via a website called Roll20. For those who have played D&D in person, how is Roll20 different than while you guys do it totally digitally?
There's a certain thing about getting to play in person that you just can't quite from online, where like you can make the facial expressions and everything to the people you're next to, doing a little bit of LARP as you go kind of thing. But when you're playing online, you can get more people are more comfortable in where they're sitting because they're not face to face with you, and there's also just a lot of things you can do on Roll20 specifically that you can't do on a tabletop without hours and hours of work just putting stuff together that I can do in a few minutes online, like special effects and such like that, to kind of bring the world to life even more. So it really depends on your preference between the two, but personally, both are completely different environments, and it's worth doing both if you can.
So, speaking of bringing the world to life, Yasa D&D is entirely homebrewed game. So y'all came up with your own world to bring to life, and the lore around it. That is, frankly, my favorite way of gaming and creating games. What is one of your favorite stories that you guys created for this world?
That's a hard one because we've done a lot of stuff in the last 3 years, but I'd say one of my favorites, I didn't even realize it as we were making it. We had created this whole history where the guild masters had fought off this evil god and put him at bay for a little bit. And in the process of that, one of my characters had technically died and then was brought back by the Raven Queen, the goddess of death. And it was never explicitly said. It was something more implied that even me, who wrote most of that situation, didn't even really realize it had happened until some of the extra details we had brought in later. Like, the world started to build itself without us needing to write anything explicitly.
That sounds like heresy to me. No, that sounds awesome.
What's you guys' process for writing an original campaign?
Process is... I'm not entirely sure. I know most of it was we came up with a map first and sectioned that off into different areas to be explored later on, listed races in each area, and then just kind of let it build itself. A lot of collaborative story writing between the different DMs we had to start, and pulling it together, letting each person tell their own story in one area while we tried to somehow make it all form into one in an interesting way to overlap. For an individual game, it's usually make a map and come up with it on the spot, because players will ruin any planning you have.
Yes.
That's pretty common. But...
There's a phrase in the army that no plan survives contact with the enemy.
Yeah.
And it works for, I think, any kind of RP scenario where no plan survives contact with the players.
You do minimal planning, just enough to have something for them to work with. Past that, you really have to leave it open to interpretation and improvisation.
For sure. So, with your experience here in Sokan D&D, I've got to ask, what was it that got you into tabletop gaming in the first place?
So I was actually taught by my parents play D&D. I remember they were playing the 3.0 version when I was a kid. I wasn't allowed to play with them, but I could listen in and such. And me and my cousin and my brothers made up our own little D version to play because we just really wanted to while my parents were all trapped in the room with their friends playing. And we pulled out dice, paper, and some coins and made up a story for a short thing, and it just kind of evolved from there for me. But I grew up playing D&D with my family and games.
While you're reflecting upon those days and the recent ones, do you have any great memories, any favorite times, favorite sessions from D&D that are, it can be something in your long time history or something more recently? And so
I would say one of my favorite games, I was DMing for my two brothers. They one was playing a rogue, one was playing a Barbarian, and my brother was trying to the rogue was trying to unlock a door, and the other one got bored, so he went over and ripped the door off. And of course my other brother threw a fit about it and was like, I could have gotten it there, whatever. So in character, the Barbarian picks the door up and puts it back and says, there you go. That was one of my it's just one that stuck with me forever. It's one of my favorites.
That's one of my favorite aspects of D&D and just tabletop gaming in general, is the freeform nature of it. It keeps everyone on their toes, especially the DM. How do you adapt to this? It's really fun. So you talked about having like getting some dice as a kid. Playing with your siblings. How many dice do you now own? And do you have a favorite set?
I own a lot. I don't have a specific number for you. I've got this mini chest that my dad bought me and kind of decorated for me that I just has all my dice in there and they look like jewels. My son likes to go and play with them. And as for favorite set, I'm weird with my dice. I have different dice for different types of characters, so I don't necessarily have a favorite. Like, I've got some smoky dice for when I'm playing a rogue, or I've got some ice crystal looking ones for any sorcerers I play. I even have a set of tiny dice to be able to travel with.
Do you have like a lucky set, or have you ever punished bad dice in front of others to set an example?
Oh, swapped out a set because they keep rolling bad? Totally.
Yeah.
Even though that stigma is totally not true, I still follow it. If I keep rolling ones, I will swap out my D20.
In these trying times where we can't meet up in person to play games, virtual gaming becomes incredibly useful. If you're interested in being a part of an online D&D experience, head on over to sokangaming.org/Yasta D&D. That's YASTAH D&D. All right, here we are at the end of our show, and that means that it's that time again. It's tea time. So here's a question for you guys. We talk a lot about movies, but not a lot about how we go and see them. What's your specific movie-going ritual? Do you guys like to do dinner at a show with the family? Is it more of a date night thing? Do you load up on theater popcorn or sneak in any kind of candy? Leo, do you put Cheese Whiz on your popcorn, or is that just a Thanksgiving thing?
It was ranch in mashed potatoes.
I'm sorry, do you put ranch on your popcorn when you go to the movies?
probably wouldn't be bad.
That sounds amazing, actually.
Yeah. I will say I have a new movie theater tradition. So there's the old school movie theater tradition. I often go with the husband, and very often also go with like a group of friends. So it's more of a friend night for me. I have a lot of friends who are into the CU films, and that's what we go with them to see. I have other friends that are kind of like my just hangout friends. Or work friends that we'll go see just another movie when we do movies. But in terms of the snacks, I'm always gonna get a popcorn, and I'm usually gonna get Reese's Pieces. I usually don't get those any other time than when I'm at the movie theater. And then, of course, a large Coke Zero. But my new tradition go-to, because my theater just got liquor, is a Jack and Coke Icy, and that is off the chain.
What was that Star Wars one you had?
Yeah, that's whenever I went.
That
That's
was
the first time
Jack
I had
and
it.
Coke
That was the
Icy?
Jack and Coke Icy, and it's amazing, amazing. It's like icy, like the brand icy, like that real light snow coney thing, not like a heavy snow cone, but kind of
Yeah.
airy thing. And it's Jack and Coke. And it's so freaking good. They're like $10 a pop, and I'll usually have 2 or 3 during the movie.
So I found I don't have friends in real life, so it's really just the family. And I'm a sucker for popcorn. There is just something about popcorn at the movies, whether it's really effective advertising or there really is something to it, but I just love to get some buttery popcorn, and then to even get the terrible, awful, super bad for you liquid faux butter from the theater and add that on top of it. Oh, there's nothing better.
Is it faux butter or is it clarified?
I don't know. It's liquid gold.
Yeah, it's delicious. Whatever it is. I mean, I don't care. It's not going to
Yeah.
change my habits, but I'm
Whatever
just
it
curious.
is. Whatever it is, I'm drowning my popcorn in.
Yeah.
Yeah. The downside is I always get the popcorn that's in like a tall bag. And so I
Yeah.
have to drench the top and I have to shake it to try and get as much of that stuff to coat as much of the popcorn as possible. Oh,
Oh,
I-
if you try and get it like down the sides, that way it'll like stick to the outside of the bag, and then that'll help with saturating.
yeah, but I have
don't
a
get
thing
to-
about getting stuff on my hands.
I don't get to
like,
butter it. Do you get to butter your own? Like they-
yeah.
Oh.
At some
What do you-
places, yeah, they have it
Yeah.
in the lobby.
at our theater,
Yeah.
you can't do that. The youth behind the counter do it for me.
Yeah.
Well, it's probably
we-
because they're giving you alcohol. Probably.
Well, ours has alcohol too, but there's like little stations that you can go to, and they have like little things like little cups of jalapenos if you got like nachos or something, and then there's
Yeah.
like the liquid butter dispensers. Oh, it's so good. But in addition to that, so that used to be my go-to was the buttered popcorn. That is to die for. And my youngest is, I'm convinced she's addicted to Coca-Cola ices. She has a problem. Every time we go anywhere that has an icy machine, she must have a Coca-Cola icy. And I decided I was going to try one because I was like, what is my girl addicted to? And lo and behold, now I'm addicted to them.
Yeah, they're bad.
Whenever we go to the
They're
movies.
good.
Try a
So-
Jack and Coke one, dog.
I may see if my theater when they reopen if they can do that. But as it stands, it's a popcorn for all of us with that liquid gold throughout, and then giant Coke ices for the entire family. So good. Makes me want to go see a movie right now.
Yeah, ours has mostly been we'll get the big popcorn and the sodas, but me and my husband have to get different sodas because we drink different things. And we always get those pretzel bites at ours. They've got these really good, perfectly salted pretzel bites, and they give you like the biggest amount of cheese they possibly can to where it's like
Ooh.
overflowing in the little
Yeah.
plastic thing. And I love it. We can't actually take the kid to the movies very often, so most of the time it's whenever the grandparents can take him, we go to the movies on our way home.
Oh, I love a good soft pretzel. Oh man, if it can be done well. There's a place
Yeah.
called Auntie Anne's
Yeah.
Yes.
around here. Oh,
We get those all the
so
time, anytime we're at the mall.
yes. Oh,
Killer.
it doesn't help my thighs, but it's delicious.
Yeah, you guys are talking about the Coke ices, but those the blue ones. The ones that
Give
are
me a headache.
raspberry
Maybe 'cause
or
I drink
blue
it fast.
cherry.
Wow.
blue raspberry. Yes, no, the ones
Blue
that are
raspberry.
straight sugar. That's where it's at.
Yeah.
My husband
Yeah,
loves
those are good.
anything blue. He'll always order the blue drink or the blue soda. I'm not into it.
What flavor do you want? Blue.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't care what it actually is. I know the color. That one. Yeah, my family actually, well, whether it's family or friends, we used to do dinner before a movie, so like, you wouldn't eat too much popcorn or whatever. But now we've actually started, we'll go out to eat after the movie, because then we can sit and talk about the movie after we've seen it and like further experience the
Oh,
plot and all
yeah.
that stuff together.
A nice
So-
debrief around the dinner table.
Yeah. Another thing that I've really liked is there's been an increase in like theaters that also serve food. So we used to have around here the Alamo Draft House, and it was known for like one of the first theaters that just served alcohol. And then they branched out into actually serving meals, but it was like, chili cheese fries and greasy burgers. Well, a couple years ago, we actually got an upgrade to that. It's like movie house and eatery where they had recliners, and they would serve like margaritas and like actual nice dinners and stuff while you're watching a movie. And that's been how my wife and I will spoil ourselves on a date night. If we got somebody to watch the girls, oh, that's fantastic.
I love the Alamo Draft House. They have peanut butter banana cookies that are so good.
Well, if you guys would like to submit a tea time question for the podcast, head on over to sokengaming.com/sokenmedia and find the submission bar on the right-hand side of the page. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to this episode of the Sokan podcast. For more Sokan media, you can visit us at sokengaming.com/sokenmedia, follow our Twitter at SokenGaming, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Sokan Gaming Community. And look for future episodes of the podcast on Google Podcasts and iTunes. Until next time, I've been T.
I've been Jace.
I was an M and will remain Leo.
I'm Sully.
And we'll see you all next week.
Stay classy, Soken.
Thank you for listening to the Sokan Community Podcast. Craving more? Visit us on Twitter and YouTube at Sokan Gaming, as well as our website, www.sokengaming.com. Until next time, stay classy. Right, Jace?